All right, good morning. Hey, so glad that you guys showed up today. Back to school is on right now, guys, and I'm gonna be honest, it's day 2. Our kids came back with runny noses and fevers. It's been awesome. Loving it, loving life right now. It's a lot of fun. Hopefully it's been better for you, but we're jumping into our text today, Mark chapter 6, everybody. If you got a Bible, meet me there, verses 45 through 52 this morning. For context, last Sunday, Dana preached a great message about Jesus feeding the 5,000. We see Jesus in the wilderness with 5,000 plus men, women, and children. They essentially bring the equivalent of a schoolboy's Lunchables to Jesus, and he multiplies it and feeds everybody. 5 loaves of bread, 2 fish, feeding 5,000 plus people. And it's this incredible picture that just as the people of God were in the wilderness with Moses and manna came from heaven, there was provision for them there. Now Jesus is the true and the better Moses who is feeding a tired and a jacked up group of people in a wilderness, providing for them what they need to carry on. And by the way, this is where you and I can have a lot of hope in life, because if you feel tired right now, if you feel jacked up by life, I'm telling you, Jesus has what it takes to sustain you there. That's the hope that you and I can have. And now we're gonna see this theme of Jesus, the true and greater Moses, continue to develop throughout the rest of the Gospel of Mark. And we see this amazing portrait of Jesus in the text today. Starting in verse 45 through 48, this is what it says. Immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat. This is after the feeding of the 5,000, and go before him to the other side to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the 4th watch of the night, this is a Roman metric for time, this is the very end of the night, between about 3 and 6 a.m., about the 4th watch of the night, Jesus came to them, look at this, walking on the sea. Now, first thing, before we talk about how crazy that is, what's going on, I want to talk about the disciples here for a few minutes, everybody, because to give you some context about Jesus's disciples here in Mark chapter 6, last week in Mark chapter 6, verse 31, it says that these guys had no leisure even to eat. And now here they are battling a storm literally all night long. These guys are exhausted. They haven't eaten. They are tired, right? Some of you, when you don't eat, let's be real, you turn into Satan himself. Like you start manifesting demons and you just go crazy. Anybody marry that guy, all right? Don't be ashamed, okay? A couple of you, right? But that's what happens, right? They're hangry, they're upset, they are tired. They've got crowds of people pressing in around them everywhere. They can't get any rest. They're like new moms that are just touched out. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, it's like, don't look at me, don't touch me, don't even think about it, get away from me. They need a sensory deprivation room for about 3 days is what they need, because they are overstimulated. They are tired. They are exhausted. In addition to this, in verse 50, it says that they were terrified. So we have physical duress. They have been battling this storm now, on piling on top of all of that. They're fighting throughout the night a storm. I mean, have you ever done the row machine at the gym? No? Do you guys work out? Do you care about your life? All right. You know, the row machine, you sit on it and then you do, it's hell on earth. I can't do it for more than 5 minutes without feeling like I need to throw up or die or both. And they had been doing, they like sailing literally all night in the midst of a horrifically bad storm. All of these guys' reserves, y'all, this is what I'm trying to say. Emotionally depleted, physically depleted, physically depleted. They are tired, they are exhausted, they are exasperated, and they are at the darkest point of the night in the middle of a storm, right? And by the way, it was their association to Jesus that put all of this on them. I mean, like, think about it. If it wasn't for Jesus and them hanging out with him, they'd probably just be on the beach chilling, sleeping right now for all I know, right? But it was their association to Jesus that actually put them in this moment. Everybody's reserves in this boat, y'all, is showing negative numbers. And here's the thing, let me just press on this for a second, because I think this is worth mentioning. Some of you have this idea of Jesus that's wrong, and you think that following Jesus is just easy, right? It's just like, Yeah, like here I am with Instagram and like taking, my screenshot of like the cool quote for the day and putting it up on the story, and nobody sends me any hearts, and like it's persecution. Don't you? Like this tends to be your vision and your version of Christianity in the West, that it's easy and there's no demands really on your life. You're not generous, you're not sacrificing, you don't have any sense of pain. You're not slaying a dragon of sin or injustice in the world, sort of just skating by at the bare minimum requirements. And this is sort of our vision of Christianity in the West, to which these guys are literally preaching at you and I, y'all. You're doing it wrong. Right? If that's the case, we are absolutely doing it wrong. All right, listen. Some of you, you're here, and this is what I love about our community is we continue to see people give their lives to Jesus that didn't know Jesus before. Some of you, you have recently become a Christian in recent weeks and months. You've recently been water baptized, or you're about to be water baptized. You're saying, yes, I'm going to live my life for Jesus. That's awesome. Love that. So glad that you're here. Some of you, you're still in that category of trying to figure out, what do I think about Jesus? Who is this, wandering itinerant preacher, rabbi that lived 2,000 years ago? Was he really God? Did he really die? Did he really rise? You're in that sort of skeptic category. Again, I'm so glad that you're here, but let me just fight for you for a second to make sure that you don't have a wrong idea of what following Jesus is all about. All right, or for those of you that are new in the faith, and I want to make sure that you don't have a wrong idea of how this is all meant to work. This is not give your life to Jesus, become a Christian, and all of a sudden everything's gonna go well for you. Your life is gonna get easy. Your problems are gonna go away. And when you get God, you sort of get a genie in a bottle that you can rub, when you have a bad day, and you get your 3 wishes and boom, you can move on with life. That is not how this works. Look at the disciples. They are about to go down with the ship again. Right? This is the second time we've seen this in the Gospel of Mark. Like, they consistently facing danger and pressure and exhaustion. And so often this is what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus. So no, friend. Do not become a follower of Jesus because you want an appeal to God for an easier life. And in fact, Jesus in Luke chapter 14, when he's illustrating what discipleship, following Jesus, is all about, he gives a story. He pitches a story of one king going out to war against another. Like Jesus, you want to know what discipleship is like? Many of us is just like, yeah, it's coffee and reading your Bible and getting persecuted on Instagram. But no, that's not it. He's like, you want to know what this is like? It's like a war. That's what following Jesus is really all about. So if you're looking for an easy life, man, don't become a Christian, I promise you. If you want a difficult one, become a Christian. If you want a life that's full of sacrifice, that's full of pain, that's full of being misunderstood, but that's also full of dragon slaying and world-changing adventures, that's horribly uncomfortable and inconvenient, but eternal, then give your life to Jesus and let's get on with following him together. But don't you dare for a second think about following him because you think that this is an appeal to God for an easier life, because oftentimes the complete opposite is true. And they're preaching at us, sometimes following Jesus is going to cost you. Now, let me kind of look at this from a different angle here for a second, Mark chapter 6. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, what we continue to see throughout the Gospel of Mark is the storms of life, they come. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, you are going to hit difficulty in life. And how many of you have found out yet that crisis is never planned? It's never planned. These moments are never planned. They had no idea what they were walking into. And furthermore, Jesus sent them into it, by the way. That'll kind of mess with your theology. But they had no idea the struggle that they were about to encounter. Crisis is never planned. I was reminded of this a couple weeks ago. I was at small group actually, and I got a call. It was about 7 o'clock at night from Pastor Ty. And when Pastor Ty calls me at 7 o'clock, it's never good news, right? He's never called me at 7 and been like, hey man, I know we look at each other for about 40 hours every week and you can't get enough of me, but just thought I'd call and check in. How you doing? What'd you have for dinner? If Ty calls you at 7 o'clock at night, my first thought was, who's dead? Right, here's Grim Reaper Ty Morgan, right, knocking on my door, about to blow up my life. Who is not alive anymore? And so I answer the call. I'm talking to Ty, and he's like, "Hey, Tay, just not gonna sugarcoat it. Just got to go straight after this. Your grandpa just died. My dad's dad. Grandpa just died." These conversations, guys, I've had enough of them at this point in my life to recognize now how just it's just wild. Like everything is fine 1 minute, totally cool. And then all of a sudden, 20-second conversation and boom, everything changes. This can happen to any of you at any point. This can happen to, like, who knows the next time I'm gonna get that call, who's it gonna be about? Like, or you, when you get that call, who it's going to be around. Like, life has brevity and it has incredible uncertainty. And I'm on the phone with Ty, just like, what the heck just happened, dude? And so I book it out to my grandpa's job. There's ambulances there, EMS 6 is there, all sorts of flashing crazy lights. I see my grandpa's truck. I go into the back of the aid unit. He's on the bed. My grandma is on top of him, sobbing, weeping, crying, absolutely out of her mind. Can't believe this is happening. I've got uncles, my dad around me. Everybody's just like, how in the crap did we get here right now? This is what I mean, that life has uncertainty and life has brevity, and crisis ultimately is never planned. And I was reflecting on this again and just saying, we did his graveside service. We did his memorial service here yesterday. And I was just reflecting on this again. Like that moment can literally come for you any day regarding any person. And so maybe you're here and you're in that category of like, you're just at the end of yourself, man. Maybe you experienced the loss of a loved one recently. Maybe it's not that, but you got pain and pressure and heartache coming from other angles. You're feeling emotionally exhausted. You're feeling physically depleted right now. You're mentally exasperated. You're spiritually tapped out. Maybe that's you. In fact, I heard a story in recent years, a guy by the name of Brian Johnson. He's a Christian music writer. We actually sing a bunch of his songs here at New Song. And a number of years ago, he had this really intense, like mental breakdown, panic attack, just ground opened up and swallowed him whole type moment. And he's had mental health conditions his entire life. And this was like just everything came to a head in his life. Everything had piled up so much to where the balloon popped. Or the proverbial rubber band of his life completely gave way and snapped and blew up in a million pieces. He's at home and he just begins crashing and burning. And his kids are around, his wife is there. Of course, when dad's cool, when dad's chill, everybody's like, yeah, I think we're gonna be okay. But when dad freaks out, man, like this is the sky is falling and this isn't a good moment. So wife and kids, everybody's freaking out. They're calling 911. Everybody is on their way to come and help this family, to help Brian. And he looks at his kids and he says this fascinating thing that stuck with me ever since I heard it. He looks at them and he had enough wherewithal to get these words out in the midst of the panic attack that he was having. And he looks at his children and he says this, hey guys, this is where God becomes real. Isn't that so good? He's literally having a panic attack. 911's about to show up and he looks at his kids and he's like, all right, guys, in the midst of my brokenness and my weakness, my life that is blowing up in front of you that you're getting a front row seat to. By the way, this is where God becomes real. In other words, what am I trying to say, guys? This is a part of how God redeems suffering for the believer. Sure, you can get pissed off and hard-hearted and separate yourself from God and kind of run away and do your whole weird deconstruction thing. That's never a really good idea because it's usually done not in the presence of Jesus, in the presence of Christian community, in the presence of the scriptures. So what gets reconstructed is a lot worse and scary and it does you a lot more harm. By the way, that's how that story tends to go. But if you can choose that path, but if you will press in to God's presence in the midst of the suffering and the brokenness, here's how God redeems it for you. This is what Brian is saying, the conceptual becomes experiential for you. This is how God redeems suffering, that there are moments of encountering God, the deepening of your faith in Jesus that only happen in the midst of the vice grip of life. And this is what he's saying. This is where God becomes real. When you go through a difficult moment, how God redeems it is what was conceptual actually becomes experiential. It forces a brokenness and a desperation that God always responds to. C.S. Lewis says it this way. He says this, God whispers to us in our pleasure, but he shouts to us in our pain. He whispers to us in our pleasure, but he shouts to us in our pain. And so for those of you right now, you're going through a difficult moment. You're saying spiritually depleted, emotionally depleted, physically depleted, mentally, emotionally depleted. What God wants to do, He shouts at us in those moments. And so what I'm trying to say is if you're here and that's you and your life just blew up, the fact that I am preaching this right now and that you're here under the sound of my voice, and this is our teaching text, sovereignly orchestrated by the Spirit of Jesus to coincide with how everything is a disaster around you, this is God shouting at you right now in the midst of what you're navigating through. Now, what he shouts, and this is where you and I get very frustrated, it's often much different than what we would think. And that's certainly the case in Mark chapter 6 today. This is where this gets wild. Look at the rest of verse 48, reading through 52. It says this, he meant to pass by them. So Jesus came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them. If you got a Bible, underline, he meant to pass by them. That's really key. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought that it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. I love that. Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid. You want some steel for your spine today and what you're navigating through? Hear Jesus saying this to you in the midst of what you're going through. Take heart, it is I. Take courage. What he's saying to them is, I'm with you. I'm here. It's not a ghost, it's me. I'm present. I'm walking on the water around you in the midst of the storm. Do not be afraid. Think about that, guys. This is so wild. Some 360 plus times in the Bible, the command to do not fear shows up. By the way, this isn't optional. This isn't Jesus like, yeah, we can take a vote and decide if we want to disobey this command or not. This is Jesus saying, no, do not be afraid. I am with you. For if you are a believer, listen, you have not been given a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. Jesus is, what he's saying to these guys is, hey man, where you're gripped by fear, where it's defining your view of life, yourself and God, don't be afraid. Jesus is greater than the fear that you and I have. That's what he's saying. But look back at this. He meant to pass by them. Now, by the way, this wasn't sneaky Jesus, okay? This wasn't Jesus like trying to like hide behind the waves and, like try to not catch Peter's eyesight. And then all of a sudden Peter was like, hey, Jesus, and Jesus is like, crap, you got me. Well done, Peter. That's not what's going on here. And in fact, what Mark is doing is he is layering a lot of Old Testament Bible passages on top of this moment. I'll give you a few examples of this. Jesus walking on the sea, that image, passing by his disciples. The ability to control the sea is a divine attribute in both the Old Testament and also, by the way, in Greco-Roman culture. So this shows up in like Homer's Iliad and several other places. And so what Jesus is doing here is he's saying, hey, look, I am the God of both Jew and Gentile. I am the God trampling on the waves. I am the answer for both the Jew and the non-Jew. That's what Jesus is saying here. In addition, that expression to pass by, this is so significant. This is the same, okay, you guys ready to do some theology? All right, can you put your thinking caps on? All right, this is so good. This is gonna wreck your life. The expression to pass by is the same expression that appears in the Old Testament when God displays his glory to people. All right, let me give you a few examples. Job chapter 9, verse 8 and verse 11 says this, who alone, speaking of God, stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. Verse 11, behold, he passes by me and I see him not. Does that sound familiar? Right? They thought he was a ghost. They're freaking out. They're terrified. Jesus is passing by the disciples on the sea. Ghost means definitely not God. They did not perceive him. They didn't know what was going on. Behold, he passes by me, I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. This is prophecy. Job he's prophetically telling hundreds of years before this moment in Mark chapter 6 happened that Jesus, God incarnate, was gonna come walking on the sea, pass by his disciples, and he was not gonna be seen and noticed by them. In 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 11, Elijah has God's glory pass by him. By the way, scripturally, theologically, these are referred to as theophanies. This is a theophany. When God reveals himself to humans in the Bible, it's called a theophany. It says this, God spoke to Elijah, go out and stand on the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore the mountains and broke in pieces the rocks before the Lord. This is Elijah getting a theophany. God is passing by him with his glory. Exodus chapter 33, verses 18 through 19. Moses, he cries out to God, says, please show me your glory. By the way, great prayer to pray. You should sit with Moses for a little bit in Exodus chapter 33, verse 18, and pray that prayer every single day of your life. God, show me your glory. What's he saying? God, show me who you are. Show me your character. Show me your nature. In the midst of everything that I think that I need in my life, I recognize what I need the most is to just see you and to behold you as you rightly are. And God says in verse 19, I will make all of my goodness, look at this, pass before you and will proclaim before you the name of the Lord. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious and will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. By the way, I love that. That's so cool. It's amazing. God's like, I'm gonna pass by you, Moses, in all of my glory. And we tend to think like God's showing up with like a lightning bolt and a hammer and he's just gonna like pummel Moses to the ground, right? It's just like, yeah, Moses, you suck, you're horrible. How does God pass by him? With his goodness. This grace. You want to know what the glory of God looks like? It's the holy, transcendent God who is full of goodness and mercy and compassion in your direction. This is Moses getting a theophany right here. God is passing him by. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 13 through 14, this is Moses' encounter with God at the burning bush. It says this, Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? Next slide, verse 14. God said to them, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. In the Hebrew, it's Yahweh, right? You could be here not a Christian, you've probably heard the Christian God called Yahweh before. This is the Hebrew name for God that God gives himself. I am who I am. It is Yahweh. Now here's where this gets radical and crazy and why you cannot just like Jesus and reduce him to the level of a guy who said some cool stuff a couple thousand years ago. Jesus comes to the disciples trampling on the sea, walking on the storm, and he said, take heart, it is I. In the Greek, ego eimi is what Jesus is saying right there. That is the Greek transliteration of the Hebrew Yahweh. Do you hear what I'm saying right now? This is literally Jesus showing up, walking on the storm, trampling it underfoot, and being like, yo, what's up, players? I am Yahweh. Look at me walking on the storm right now. This is the portrait of Jesus. He's saying, listen, I am coming to you in the storm as Yahweh. I've come to trample it underfoot. These are the disciples of Jesus getting a theophany right here as they encounter the God-man Jesus Christ. Now, here's what Jesus is doing that you and I need to pay attention to, by the way. He's saying, look, guys, I know that you're going through something right now that's really difficult, but the thing that you need more than anything, it's not more money, it's not more freedom, it's not a better sex life, it's not a better marriage, it's not, all of your problems in life get straightened out. You want to know what you need more than anything, Jesus is saying to these guys as they're literally probably about to die here. I mean, this is a pretty epic storm. He's saying, here's what you need. You need to not focus on yourself, and you need to shift your focus to who I am and what I can do. Get your eyes off of yourself, what you think you can do, and shift your focus to me, who I am and what I can do. Now, this is so counterintuitive because what you and I tend to do in life, especially when stuff gets difficult as modern people, what do we tell each other? You just gotta create yourself, man. You just gotta find yourself. You just gotta look within and find the strength and pull it out and let it manifest. Make yourself, this idea of identity, right? It's everything in our current cultural moment. Know yourself, love yourself, feel good about yourself, create yourself. You're going through this horrible thing. Use it as leverage to create the version of yourself that you really want to be. Now, this is where you and I get really frustrated with Jesus, because it's not that Christianity doesn't offer an identity. It does. And the identity that's on offer for you in Jesus is altogether more satisfying, permanent, valuable, worth going after than any other identity that you could ever possibly create for yourself. I'll explain more about that in a second, but this is the upside down scandal of the Christian identity. The Christian identity. It says this, that you can't start with you. This isn't about you creating yourself to be something or someone. You have to start with the God who created you. You have to start with Jesus, right? I mean, we just read it, guys. There's nothing in the text where, Jesus showed up and he was walking on the water and gave the guys a pep talk. Like, come on, guys, keep going. Pull the strength from within. Create, show the world who you really are. He doesn't do that. He doesn't show up and give the guys a pep talk. He doesn't do that. But in essence, this is how modern identities work, is they're performative. And this is the current cultural moment. It's based on your performance. Modern identities are achieved and not received. You have to look a certain way. You have to live a certain way. You have to support X, organization, give money there, have this sort of value systems. For some of you, you're looking for identity and money and sex and power, pleasure, beauty, and wherever else that you are looking to have a sense of, this is who I am in the world. It's performative, and that puts an incredible weight on you that will ultimately crush you, right? That's the point. And this has given rise to cancel culture in the West, which is a complete disaster, because if you screw up at any given point, if we could dig something up from your past that would disqualify you from this certain identity that you're trying to put yourself into, then, you're canceled and you lose your identity, and we take it from you by mob rule, right? And by the way, let me just say this. I know I've said this before. If cancel culture existed in the Bible, guys, we don't have anybody, right? Nobody. I mean, David, man after God's own heart, had sex with his buddy's wife, got her pregnant, sent him off to war to get him killed. Man after God's own heart. Imagine what that guy was capable of if he wasn't a man after God's own heart, right? You don't have anybody in the Bible, but this is a part of the story this is the main point of the story of the Bible. It's not about you being the hero. It's not about me being a hero. It's not about you creating yourself or recreating yourself. It's about letting Jesus be the hero. The gospel is not create yourself. It's let God recreate you. This is the story of Jesus and what he's on about in the world. This is how modern identities work. They're performative. They're not received. The Christian identity flips that on its head, right? There's no, you can read the rest of Mark 6. They don't get together. Jesus doesn't sit down with them and have a therapy session like, all right, Peter, let's reframe your trauma here. How did you feel when you almost died in the boat? Well, I felt scared. I felt really scared. But you know what? I just doubled down and I manifested the strength within. They don't do that, y'all. That doesn't happen. What did they get? They got something incredibly more grounding and transcendent and powerful than that. They saw God walking on the water, right? You want peace in life? Don't try to create yourself an identity that's performative. Come to Jesus. Look at him. Get a vision for Christ, guys. That's what I'm saying. You got to get a vision of Jesus. The reason why the world is such a disaster. You want to know the reason why you're such a disaster? If you are, why the church is such a disaster, society, our city, or people, why you're stuck in sin, why you're prideful, arrogant, why you're stuck in a marriage that sucks, you're addicted to porn. You want me to tell you exactly why? It's because you don't have a vision for Jesus for all that he is. And this is what's going on. And Jesus is like, listen, this is what you need more than anything. I could calm the storm. Jesus like, I could calm the storm. And in fact, I'm going to. But you know what you guys need before we even get there? You need to understand that I am Yahweh walking on the water right now. And when you see that, dude, lights out, everything changes. You want to talk about an identity that's going to put steel in your spine and help you face off with the worst days of life? Right there. Because you're starting in the right place. You're starting with God. You're starting with Jesus. I mean, one of my favorite portions of the entire Bible is Revelation chapter 4 and 5. It's this amazing vision into the throne room reality that's happening right now, by the way. I want to tell you that there is a throne standing in heaven, and God is seated on it. This throne is not teetering. It is not toppling. The God who sits on it created everything. He is the sovereign over the uncreated and the created realms. He is the King of all and the Lord of all. You see, in Revelation 4 and 5, there's an emerald rainbow around God seated on the throne. There's flashes of lightning and peals of thunder. There's these like crazy living creatures with eyes everywhere and wings, and they're flapping around and freaking out. And there's angels and living creatures. There's this sea of glass like crystal mingled with fire that's stretching out from outside of the throne room. Everybody is worshiping God and they don't want to do anything else. They are falling on their face. And there's actually these elders, it says in Revelation 4 and 5, they're beholding the glory of God. And you know what they do? They take the crowns that are on their heads and they chuck it at Jesus's feet, and they fall down and they worship. Right? And they are not bored. There is not a worship leader in heaven trying to coerce everybody like, lift your hands. It'd be great to get some expressiveness in church today, right? Like none of that is happening. They are seeing and beholding the glory of God, guys, and they're taking their crowns and they're freaking just chucking it at Jesus' feet, just saying, oh God, you are so fascinating. You are so brilliant. You are so beautiful. Nobody there, guys. This is what I'm trying to say. None of these elders or living creatures or angels are all of a sudden like, they don't look at Jesus and all of a sudden come to themselves and say, I'm awesome. You know, like I'm gonna go, this whole Jesus thing, worship thing, really cool, looking at God thing, really cool. I'm gonna go create myself now. Nobody's doing that. Nobody's like, all right, yeah, cool, Jesus, thanks, peace out. Now I'm gonna go and, create my own identity and figure my life out and go do all my things and pursue pleasure and beauty and all these other places. No, they're throwing their crowns, guys, repeatedly. Everybody that's there, and this is kind of a part of the bad idea that Christians have about heaven. Like I've had so many people talk like, I don't want to go to heaven because we're just going to worship all the time. It's like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about. You are going to behold the glory of God for eternity, right? That's what you're not going to want to do anything else. You're just going to want to be there in Revelation 4 and 5 and just look at Jesus and then fall on your face and like, oh my God, you're so beautiful. You're so amazing. That's where your home is. If you are a follower of Jesus, everybody that's there is, wow, I would rather be here than anywhere else. And by the way, this is where preachers have done you a horrible disservice. I remember being so bored with Jesus in the church, like so bored, because he was often for me portrayed like this effeminate guy who sat with kids a lot, who didn't have a firm handshake, and, who was a bit of a wallflower, the felt board version of Jesus, whose self-defense skills were at the level of like Kip from Napoleon Dynamite. You know what I mean? Like that, I had a very difficult time worshiping a guy as God that I felt like I could beat up at like 14 years old, right? How is that? It wasn't translating, it wasn't communicating. But here's the thing, you look at Revelation chapter 19, you want to know the portrait of Jesus that we see? He's coming back on a white freaking horse, right? With a sword on his hip, and his robes are gonna be stained with the blood of his enemies. Jesus is intense, right? He is not messing around. In fact, the scriptures say that from his presence, both earth and sky fled. Do you know how awesome you have to be for the earth to look at you, turn around, run away, crap its pants, and hope you don't come looking? Seriously, that's what that means. This is Jesus, guys. He is Yahweh walking on the water and commanding the storm. Have you ever done that? No, you haven't. This is why he's so much more infinitely interesting than I am and that you are. And what you and I have an opportunity to do one of two things. Because what you focus on grows. We've talked about this before also. You focus on the chaos and the craziness around you, of which, listen, I know there's a lot. I know you're going through something. I know that you're going through a pain point and moment in life, and it's not that God isn't gonna visit you there and give you strength and minister to you in that place, as he absolutely is. But if you focus on the storm at the expense of Jesus's presence within it, it's gonna grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. It's gonna become more weighty and crushing for you, and your vision of Jesus gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. What Jesus is modeling to them is the same thing that he's saying to you. Hey, listen, guys, I know the road's gonna get bumpy. Come on, somebody. I know life is gonna get difficult. I know you're gonna have tears. I know that you're gonna have pain, and the storms and difficulties of life are going to come. And when they do, you never have to ask the question, where is God? Look out over the waves and you'll see him standing as Yahweh with them still under his feet. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear. Why? Why? For you are with me. For those of you walking through the valley of the shadow of death, I would remind you that because Jesus is the storm trampling God-man, it's just a shadow. And it is quickly disappearing. And he will bring you through. When you start with Jesus, when you start with his true identity, all of a sudden, you find incredible strength there. And also, your identity comes in view and it actually counts for something. Because here's the thing, guys. If Jesus is the one true eternal God walking on the water and calming the storm, which he is, that means that what he says about you really, truly actually matters. It means that it really actually counts for something. This is so much more significant than anything that you could ever say about yourself or create yourself to be. If Jesus is God, it really actually matters what he says about you. You are finite. You get like 80, 90 years if you're lucky. Jesus is infinite, which means 80 million years in either direction from you, he is. That means that your opinion doesn't matter and his is the only one that truly does. And this is where the Christian identity is so liberating for you because it's not performative. This is what Jesus is gonna say to many of us today. It's not performative. It's the only identity that's received and it's not achieved. In other words, creating yourself is a horrible weight to put on somebody, and maybe some of you you've been doing this. The gospel is not about you creating yourself, it's about God recreating you. It's not about you performing and achieving an identity. It's about Jesus's performance on your behalf so you can receive an identity, a new identity. John says it this way in John chapter 1, verse 12. I want you to think about how crazy this is. All right, if Jesus is God, this changes everything. If he's not, and for many of us in the church, here's a part of the problem, by the way. Just gonna process with you and step out on a limb here and hopefully this makes sense. If for many of us in the church, what happens is you've been here so long, you know all the right stuff, right? You know, yeah, Jesus is God, I get it. Yeah, child of God, son of God, loved by God, blah, 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 slow to anger, compassion. You got the t-shirt, dude. You were catechized at like 3 months old, all right? I get it. You know the stuff, but the problem is it's never been experiential for you. It stayed locked up in your head and it's never actually, and you wanna know why, by the way? Here, let me tell you why. This is exactly it. Because you don't actually really truly believe that Jesus is Yahweh walking on the storm. What you're doing is you have taken, this is so good, somebody's gonna get set free. You have taken your feelings, what you think to be true, you've put that over God's truth. And you've said, surely God isn't as good as he said he is. You question it, you doubt it. You know, we're back to the freaking, you know, the flower. He loves me not. He loves me not. He doesn't love me, right? Like that's the game that so many believers play. And you wanna know what you're doing when you question that? You are saying, in essence, I am more trustworthy than the eternal word of God. You wanna know where freedom is found, friend? When you and I come to this book and we break ourselves at the feet of Jesus and we say, God, let this be true and everything else be proven to be a lie, right? Because this is what truth, Jesus is the truth. That means that you can trust him and you have a choice. And many of us, what you need to do today is you need to demote your feelings. You need to demote how you're viewing God and the world around you to its proper place and let what God says to be true about you be true and rise to the top and allow it to redefine you. This is what I mean by this. Look at this verse. This is incredible. But to all who did, help me now, receive him, Jesus, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Do you know how amazing that is? Look at what do you do in that verse right there? You do nothing, right? You're not the hero, God's the hero. I'm not the hero, God's the hero. That's gonna create a humble people because that means that you and I are the villains, we're not the heroes. And Jesus is the hero, and this is where it lifts you up. The gospel lifts you up because it says, this isn't about trying anymore. This isn't about performance anymore. This isn't about you earning favor with God. It's about God has earned favor for you with himself through the person and the work of Jesus. This is an identity that's received. It's not performative. Jesus did the performing. Who believed in his name, he gave the right to become the children of God. This is incredible. Tim Keller says it this way. All right, worship team, go ahead and come on up. Community team, go ahead and come on up. I'm gonna wrap up with this thought. He talks about this idea of the Christian identity. It's received, it's not performative. It's received, it's not achieved. It's a better way of saying it. He says, this is what this means. That 1 million years from now, if you're a believer in Jesus, right, you're gonna be with God, Revelation 4 and 5, you're gonna be freaking right there and loving every second of it, all right? That's where you're going if you're a follower of Jesus. 1 million years from now, when you're there and you're perfected and your sin and brokenness has long been dealt with, God in that moment is not going to love you any more than he does right now in the midst of your brokenness. Why? Because your identity isn't achieved, it's received, it's not performative, it's given to you as a free gift of grace because of what Jesus has done. So as we take communion this morning, everybody, what I'm calling you to, I wanna call you to a greater vision of Jesus. I wanna call you to a greater vision of the storm walking and storm calming God, and hearing him say, it is I'm in the midst of what you're navigating through. I'm here with you. What you need more than anything is not for this all to go away. It's passing. You are passing through it. God will bring you to the other end of it, but in the middle of it, what is Jesus saying? It is I. Do not be afraid. He is still trampling storms underfoot today. What does it mean that he's walking on the storm? Death is under him, guys. Sin is under him. I got to stand up in front of my family the last couple of weeks at my grandpa's graveside in his memorial service and remind everybody my grandpa was a believer in Jesus. What does that mean? That death is under Jesus's feet, right? That he's not here, but he's not dead. My grandpa's not here anymore, but he's not dead. Why can I say that? Because death is under Jesus's feet. What's the storm? What are you going through? What's the trial? What's the difficulty? I'm telling you, he is still the storm walking and calming God, in his presence is an ever sure guarantee for you throughout the journey of life. Would you stand with me? I want to pray for us to that end. Lord, I thank you that your body was broken, your blood was shed, the curtain of the temple was torn, and the way has been made for us to live into your presence. God, I thank you that when the pressure's on, when the heat is on, you never back off. You always rush in. And we've got pain in this room. We've got difficulty in this room. We've got suffering in this room. And Holy Spirit, I pray as we take communion that you would, God, just release the peace of Jesus in such a way in the midst of all the chaos that we would hear you say, it is I, don't be afraid. Lord, we recognize that you took all the storms upon yourself on the cross so that we could have the great calm, the great peace that only you can bring to us. An identity that's received and not achieved. It's not based on our performance, but yours. And this is our great hope today in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, we got 3